An exhibit about 9 people enslaved by George Washington must be restored at his former home in Philadelphia after President Donald Trump's administration took it down last month. A federal judge ruled on President's Day, the federal holiday honoring Washington's legacy. The city of Philadelphia sued in January after the National Park Service removed the explanatory panels from Independence National Historical Park, the site where George and Martha Washington lived with 9 of their slaves in the 1790s, when Philadelphia was briefly the nation's capital. The removal came in response to a Trump executive order restoring truth and sanity to American history at the nation's museums, parks, and landmarks. It directed the Interior Department to ensure that those sites do not display elements that inappropriately disparage Americans' past or living. U.S. District Judge Cynthia Roof ruled Monday that all materials must be restored in their original condition while a lawsuit challenging the removal's legality plays out. She prohibited Trump officials from installing replacements that explain the history differently. Roof, an appointee of Republican President George W. Bush, began her written order with a quote from George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984 and compared the Trump administration to the book's totalitarian regime called the Ministry of Truth, which revised historical records to align with its own narrative. Quote, as if the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984 now existed, with its motto, ignorance is strength, this court is now asked to determine whether the federal government has the power it claims to disassemble and disassemble historical truths when it has some domain over historical facts. Roof wrote, it does not. She had warned Justice Department lawyers during a January hearing that they were making dangerous and horrifying statements when they said Trump officials can choose which parts of U.S. history to display at National Park Service sites. The Interior Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the ruling, which came while government offices were closed for a federal holiday. The judge did not provide a timeline for when the exhibit must be restored. Federal officials can appeal the ruling. The historical site is among several where the administration has quietly removed content about the history of enslaved people, LGBTQ+ people, and Native Americans. Signage that has disappeared from the Grand Canyon National Park said settlers pushed Native American tribes off their land for the park to be established and exploited the landscape for mining and grazing. Last week, a rainbow flag was taken down at the Stonewall National Monument, where bar patrons rebelled against a police raid and catalyzed the modern LGBTQ+ rights movement. The administration has also removed references to transgender people from its webpage about the monument, despite several trans women of color being key figures in the uprising. The Philadelphia exhibit, created 2 decades ago in partnership between the city and federal officials, included biographical details about each of the 9 people enslaved by the Washingtons at the home, including 2 who escaped. Among them was Oni Judge, who was born into slavery at the family's plantation in Mount Vernon, Virginia, and later escaped from their Philadelphia house in 1796. Judge fled north to New Hampshire, a free state, while Washington had her declared a fugitive and published advertisements seeking her return. Because Judge had escaped from Philadelphia House, the National Park Service in 2022 added it to a national network of underground railroad sites, where the agency pledged to honor, preserve, and promote the history of resistance to enslavement through escape and flight. Roof said the removal of materials about Judge conceals crucial information linking the site to the network. Only the names of Judge and the other 8 enslaved people, Austin, Paris, Hercules, Richmond, Giles, Moll, and Joe, who each had a single name, and Christopher Shields, remain engraved in the cement wall after federal employees took a crowbar to the plaques on January 22nd. Hercules also escaped in 1797 after he was brought to Mount Vernon, where the Washingtons had many other slaves. He reached New York City despite being declared a fugitive slave and lived under the name of Hercules Posey. Several local politicians and black community leaders celebrated the ruling, which came while many were out rallying at the site for its restoration. State Rep. Malcolm Kenyatta, a Philadelphia Democrat, said the community prevailed against an attempt by the Trump administration to whitewash our history. Philadelphians fought back, and I could not be more proud of how we stood together. This is just so disgusting. You know, the Trump administration, we have a right to take down, no, only the American flag can be flown at certain sites. No, that's not true. That's an assertion that they're making. It's not a law, it's not a rule, it's not anything. It's just something that they're saying because they're in office. You know, bullshit. So there's that. I have to remind you, she just issued this preliminary emergency injunction to restore the panels. By the way, they're created and they're kept up by taxpayer money. Once again, Trump just oversteps, just confidently like he can, daring someone to stop him. Well, in this case, someone did.